Welcome to the Scandinavian Mind podcast, our weekly show about how technology is changing the creative industries. Today on the program, the new outdoor with Highsnobiety. We are interviewing the team behind Highsnobiety about their report, The New Outdoor. In this episode, you'll hear from David Fischer, the founder of Highsnobiety, and the strategy director, Harry Bainbridge. We'll talk about the convergence of lifestyle industries and outdoor, the role of cultural pioneers in this development, and how Highsnobiety has collaborated with the outdoor trade show ISPO on the project. My name is Konrad Olsson, editor-in-chief and founder of Scandinavian Mind, and I'm pleased to welcome back our editor-at-large, Fredrik Ekström, on the podcast. How are you, Fredrik?
Hi, Konrad. Thank you. I'm fine.
So good to have you back. You were actually present at the ISPO trade show to do these interviews. You've dived into the report that Highsnobiety has created. Give me a little bit of a setup here. What was this project and why was it interesting to you?
So I was down at the last ISPO and I met David and Harry to talk about the report, The New Outdoor. It's a report that Highsnobiety and ISPO have launched together under the collaborative name 520M, which is the collaborative platform they have created on ISPO where lifestyle and outdoor merge together. So this report kind of takes the pulse on how cultural pioneers are approaching the outdoor field, which is Highsnobiety is born from cultural pioneers and ISPO is born from sports and outdoor. So it's kind of obvious how they want to merge those two worlds in this report.
Well, to me, Highsnobiety is streetwear culture to me. How do you see that merging? Obviously, I remember back in, I think it was 2018, we did a big fashion show kind of merging style, fashion and the outdoors. So I think the influence on the fashion industry and kind of the more trend-driven aspects of the lifestyle industry has been there for a few years. So why do you think this is happening right now?
We can see the trend is definitely going stronger and stronger now. And it's been, as you say, it's been going on for many years. It's... I think it's in 2015 Salomon were doing it, but in 2009 the North Face was doing quite a lot of it when they talked about bringing the jackets from the Himalayas down to the Broadway.
Right.
But now you can see the trend goes stronger and stronger, probably because post-pandemic and then also some parts of the crisis that goes on, that people are starting to look to the outdoors to find mental well-being, peace of mind, that kind of things. And it also merges in together with the bigger picture of clothing to be functional and long-lasting. Which is kind of like the authenticity from outdoor brands, that they make really, really strong clothes that last for long. But now you also can see that, you don't want to only look like you go outdoor. You want to have the function, you want to have the longevity in the products, but you also would like to dress more stylish and break some boundaries in how you use it, mix it and match it.
Fascinating. We should mention that aside from being our collaborator, which you've been for a few years, you actually have your day job in your own agency Above the Clouds, and we've listeners to this podcast have heard you talk about your own report, The Next Sustainable Consumer. And you also worked, in your kind of role as a consultant, you worked both with outdoor brands and fashion brands. So I think you have kind of both sides of the perspective here. Do you feel like they capture kind of the essence of what's happening in this report, do you think?
I think that you could say that they capture what they want to capture. It captures the perspective of the cultural pioneers, and that's important to to remember when reading the report. So, which means that it's a smaller bubble within the full outdoor consumer spectrum. It doesn't capture the entire outdoor world, so it's driven by the trendsetters, the people that maybe are not specifically traditional outdoor people today. But what I think it's interesting with that is that you can see that people that usually dress and style in a specific way in urban environments, they have a hugely growing interest of the outdoors. They like the products, they like the styling, they also like to go outdoor and explore. But maybe, as you can see in the report, it's that they do it in a different way. Yeah. So, but when I picked out some numbers that I think it's a little bit more interesting than the others, that they state that 7 out of 10 wish to learn more about outdoor activities, and 6 out of 10 constantly look to the outdoors for inspiration, or for inspiration about outdoor activities, which means that it's quite a big group of people within the cultural pioneers that are usually like streetwear club kind of people that now like the outdoor. They search for inspiration for it and want to go outdoor, but also that it's a different perspective. What they do is that 7 out of 10 state that they use the outdoor to boost their own creativity, to go out in the woods, go out to the lakes and find peace in mind, and that brings up creativity. And also a large number that do it to stress down, to get like increase their mental well-being. And there's also a large group that use it to get influenced and interested in niche groups. So maybe it's not so high performance mountaineering. It's rather like bird watching, fly fishing, and those small niche, a little bit nerdy kind of interests that comes.
Of course, cultural pioneers need to do even niche stuff when they go outdoor. What would the mainstream activities be? Just hiking, I guess.
Just traditional hiking is not the top of the mind. Yeah.
I love that. So, I mean, you touched on it before, but is there anything that you are missing from this report that you think they should have touched on, or that's relevant to kind of highlight in this development from your perspective?
I think that, from my perspective, working with brands that kind of like encapsulate the bigger picture from a commercial perspective, I think it would have also been interesting to have that broader picture of the entire outdoor industry evolvement, how this fits into that. Because sometimes if you're a brand and you look at the report, you'd be like, oh, this is super good. We should all go out bird watching, and we should all be projectionists and luxury lovers. I think that's important to remember, that this is a niche group within the entire outdoor segment. And then I like how they map out the different archetypes within the evolving GORP core trends. However, in the same moment, they also kind of miss out a little bit on the quiet outdoor, the more fashion-forward, traditional kind of styles that evolved during the exact same time as the report came out. Yeah. So, but otherwise, I think it's a super interesting report if you have the perspective of what's going on in the head of the cultural pioneers.
Good stuff. Oh, let's get into it. First, we're going to hear from David Fischer, the founder of Highsnobiety, obviously kind of an iconic figure in the streetwear industry by now. What were your impressions from meeting David?
Always impressed by what they have built and created around Highsnobiety. It's a true. They started out as a blog, and now it's this huge media corporation doing collaborations with brands, doing their own brand, and all of that. It's impressive. And what I like now is what they add that kind of flavor to ISPO, the lifestyle kind of segment that's been missing at ISPO, and how David understands the importance of being there, to be authentic and do it in a real way.
All right, let's hear it. Here now, David Fischer, founder of Highsnobiety.
Let me try to keep it short. So I think, so probably about 1.5 years ago, we had our first meeting with ISPO. ISPO. And obviously, ISPO is quite a machine in itself, part of Messe München, and, they're doing a lot of other shows as well. And, for us, it's always funny as Highsnobiety coming into quite, an organization like this, operates in a completely different space, and that usually also doesn't have that much of a touch point with us, right? So because we're so focused on our kind of cultural bubble, if I can say that. And but the cool thing was that so ISPO had a couple of people advising them that I suppose told them, like, hey, maybe you guys should talk to these Highsnobiety guys. Like, they understand quite a bit about culture, about fashion, and since there's something bubbling here at the intersection of these different spaces, I think they could be a really interesting partner for you. And that's essentially how we were brought in and had our first meetings. And I suppose what's always hard for us is to come into a place like ISPO, or let's say a brand that maybe hasn't been the most relevant for a younger consumer, which is our focus, right? I mean, Highsnobiety focuses on the consumer that we call the cultural pioneer, which is sort of this young millennial and Gen Z consumer that that is global, affluent, very influential, and so on and so forth. So we're very focused on this one consumer base as a company, actually, broadly, and so it's sometimes a little bit hard for us to come into these types of conversations where you feel like you're given a task that happens in a very small bubble, but ultimately everything that happens outside of that bubble is not really right for you. And so the beauty with our ISPO conversation very early on was that, number one, they realized themselves that they needed to change. And again, who am I anyways to tell them that they need to change? They know their consumer, they know their outdoor market, sports market, and so on and so forth, but they realize that trade show as a business model doesn't work anymore the way it's currently set up. The role of a trade show has significantly changed. It's not anymore a place where buyers sit on a table, write orders, and go back home, but it's really there to talk about your latest innovation. It's there to network. It's there to inspire. It's there to tell stories, for buyers, press, fans of brands to go home with, and have a very authentic way of connecting with these brands. So they realized all these things, but they also realized that they can't do it all by themselves, essentially. And so what really got us very excited about the partnership was that they were very open to, number one, think big. Number two, think long term, because we also told them we're not going to change ISPO overnight. This is a show that's been on for a very long time. I mean, and again, who are we? Like, what do we know about trade shows anyways? So, this is going to take some time to feel authentic, to get it right. And they were also willing to really do it in a 360 way that we felt was necessary. Or we couldn't just pick up the phone on day one and call some brands and ask them to now do a booth again. So it was really about figuring out, so what is the right way. So that's how the conversation started, and I think that's why we got really excited. And up until then, we really didn't work much with trade shows. Certainly not outside of our core fashion space. And that's sort of how the journey started with ISPO. And then we put together a plan, and we said, okay, we believe we should start with content and insights, So for the ISPO last year, we essentially built a first Highsnobiety booth. We created also a sub-brand for it, which is called 520M, which is the height of the city of Munich. Yeah, and so we said, let's create a sub-brand that people can connect with this space that we want to talk about, which is the intersection of fashion, culture, and the outdoors, which is, by the way, something that Highsnobiety has been talking about for quite a while already on its channels, right? So we were a big partner for Gucci with their North Face partnership. We wrote a ton about, And Wonder and all kinds of other cool Japanese, outdoor brands, Acronym, Gore-Tex, Fabrics. A lot of the brands that we cover, Supreme and Palace, and even some of the luxury players started working with Gore-Tex on outerwear garments. So the intersection was for us crystal clear and something that we had talked about for a very long time. But we wanted to make sure that we kind of give it a great foundation, as part of this partnership. So we said, okay, let's give it its own name. Let's make it feel exclusive, So it's not a place where people can just book a booth, like you're invited to be part of it. It's curated, it's special, it's high quality, and that's how we essentially got going for year one, which was November 22. And that was essentially the kickoff of the partnership.
With that said, you make it exclusive, invited, etc. Could you tell me a little bit about the brands, the selection of brands that are highlighted at the Highsnobiety area?
So last year actually it was a little different because there weren't even any brand spaces, right? So last year was very focused on the panels and the talks, right? So it was because again, we thought, okay, ISPO has been this thing for decades, and of course there's a reason why some brands didn't feel properly represented anymore, within these halls. And so, who are we to call now some of these brands that maybe don't come anymore, or that left a few years ago, to invite them back into something that they may not even know what they're getting into in a sense. And so we said, let's start with a much softer pitch in the end, and let's say, look, Highsnobiety is programming a 520M panel and talk series, and we want you to be a part of that. We want you to, actively contribute to the conversation of the outdoors and culture. And so that was the beginning of it. And so we invited, the North Face and Faction and Oakley and all kinds of, Normal Running and, all kinds of brands in the space to first sit on a panel, and have a conversation with us. And the exciting thing was that they almost all said yes. We're like, okay, yeah, we're open to that, and so it wasn't a hard pitch, but it was like a soft onboarding, onto the idea of 520M, why it matters, why it's important, so on and so forth. And then this year, for the first time, now when you come, so the booth has almost tripled in size. We take up the entire, entrance here at ISPO, and so we still have, quite significant talk and panel space, but now we also have an exhibition space, So now you see the Prada skis and the Boris Bajazan Salomon capsule, and you see something from Oakley and something from the North Face and something from Slam Jam and something from Being Hunted, which are friends of ours from Berlin that have really done a lot of work in the technical outerwear space in the last years, and so really kind of bringing down the walls between these different sections of our fashion lifestyle space, and tearing down the walls and bringing them all together in one space, and that has worked really nicely. And again, to our surprise, people were excited to be part of it, because they understand that it's authentic. They understand that we understand what they're doing and where they're going. A lot of these brands are clients of ours anyways, so we do campaigns for them, or we do collaborations for them. We do all kinds of things for them. And that's, by the way, also, as you can imagine, 520M is not something white label that we created for ISPO, but our name stands on it too. And so the minute it was clear that ISPO wanted that, we of course had to be very clear to ISPO of what we want and of what we need in order to put our name on it. And I think that keeps us very nicely in check, because that way, they're not trying to push anything down our throat. We're not trying to do it either. It's a true collaboration where both sides very much understand what level of quality and curation is necessary in order to make it feel right.
So that kind of represents pretty much how the consumer moves as well, where lifestyle and outdoor merge together.
100%. And again, this coming down of barriers is basically the story of Highsnobiety, right? We started writing about, streetwear and sneaker culture and menswear at a time where nobody really gave a damn about any of these spaces. We, were one of the purveyors of the, fusion of streetwear and luxury. That was something that we talked about from 2006-07 onwards, long before a luxury brand felt like they should be making sneakers, hoodies, t-shirts, baseball caps, or do collaborations with streetwear brands. And so for us, it's quite natural to look into this world and just not accept barriers, quite frankly. And that's not easy for people that live in these different pockets of the market, especially in sports. Everybody wants, their own baby to have this walled garden, sort of, and we just don't operate that way. We believe in personal style, and we believe personal style in 2023 has no barriers, and that's what we live and showcase, wherever we operate and wherever we show up.
And at the Highsnobiety area, you spoke, or you mentioned earlier that like content was like the key to start it, authentic content, etc. And you also launched this that we will get back to later, the white paper, the new outdoors. So how is the talks? Like, do you have different subjects? Do you work it out together with the brands, or do you set kind of like the themes?
Usually we're the ones setting the theme and the direction, but then obviously we're also open to feedback by the brands, or more importantly, we make sure that certain things get adapted so that the brands can in a really authentic way speak about it in the end. And you mentioned the white paper. So we've sort of entered this research space about 5-6 years ago, and it was, in retrospect, you never know before, but in retrospect it was a really big moment for us as a company, because we always operated in a space where everybody accepted the fact that Highsnobiety speaks to a quote-unquote cool consumer, right? Like a cool young consumer. But then there was always this sort of thing lingering in the background of like, okay, but like, do these people really have an impact on my brand? Because essentially what you're saying is there's millions and millions and millions of people out there, but this small slice of the market, they're the ones that actually change the minds of people. Those are the ones that have an impact on the wallet of what people spend their money on and what people get inspired by. And we just felt like, okay, in order to really make a big step as a business also, we need to prove that this is the case. And so we started, 5-6 years ago with a white paper called The New Luxury, which described the new relationship that a young consumer, Gen Z and young millennial consumer has with luxury. It described what do they even consider a luxury brand. And it opened up with this quite, at the time, provocative top 10 list, where we asked 4,000 cultural pioneers, what are your favorite luxury brands? And in that top 10 at the time, you had Prada, Gucci, Balenciaga, but you also had Nike, Stone Island, Off-White, and Yeezy. And I think it was this very obvious showcase. Okay, wait a second. Since when is Nike a luxury brand? Right? Like what happened here? And so, it was this realization that, okay, if an 18-year-old can spend or does spend $1,000 US or euros on a limited edition Air Jordan, I can understand that feels like a luxury object, and I think the funny thing is that the luxury brands at the time also realized, like, wait a second, like these kids spending a lot of money on this stuff, like that means they can actually afford ours as well. And so a completely new world opened up to the luxury market as well. So that's how it started. And I know it was a bit of a long circle that we took here, but that essentially the new luxury is what informs the new outdoors, right? So because again, here it's also about the disruption of the outdoor space. In some cases, the premiumization of the outdoor space, the merge of outdoor and luxury, outdoor and streetwear, outdoor and culture at large. And so, it's become, a bit of a formula on the Highsnobiety side, because we've written many, many white papers since then. We've onboarded Boston Consulting Group as a research partner of ours. So we take a very sizable 12,000 person luxury panel from Boston Consulting Group every year, and then compare it to our cultural pioneer panel to compare, how these different groups actually act and what the differences are. So that's usually our main white paper once per year in collaboration with Boston Consulting Group, and then we do smaller ones which are focused on, certain spaces. Like what's the Highsnobiety take on sports? What's the Highsnobiety take on the intersection of gaming and fashion? What's the Highsnobiety take on the post-COVID consumer, et cetera, et cetera. So those are sort of smaller chapters within our research that exist, and then some larger ones. And so the new outdoors is essentially work that is based on our 4,000 person cultural pioneer panel, which we call the Highsnobiety Rolodex. So it's a panel that we use very frequently in our client work for our research and so on and so forth. And it also mixes in, because I guess that's the other thing that makes us quite unique. We're not just an agency, we're not just a brand, we're not just retail, but above it all, we're actually a storytelling platform and and a magazine. And so it also is of course very much about Highsnobiety's quote unquote personal point of view on the outdoors, right? And so we take our own thesis of how we understand the outdoor world and the outdoor space, and then essentially cross-check it with this panel of 4,000 cultural pioneers.
So when moving into this, because that also, it's super interesting to see that. You come from the world of culture, youth culture, like the.
Culture is of course a loaded word, right? Nowadays, but yeah,
make it easy. You come from more of a fashion-oriented streetwear kind of like youth culture, that contemporary youth culture, so to speak, urban culture. And now in this area, when you're in the outdoor world, like what can the outdoor industry, brands operating in this field, what can they learn from your knowledge and insights about like contemporary youth culture and how that is driving hype and relevancy and engagement?
Well, I think in the end of the day, I think there's a lot that they could learn. It's a lot about having a broader view on the market. It's a lot about being less proud on this is how we've always done it, and this is how it needs to get done, or this is not authentic and this is not that. I think the space that we come from operates in a much more free manner. So for example, the world of collaboration has of course opened a ton of opportunity for brands in the lifestyle, fashion, and luxury space. So we do a ton of work within that as well. It's one of the predominant marketing mechanics that we see in our world today, where you get to cross over into another space, suddenly start speaking to a new type of consumer that you maybe have not spoken to before. Let's take Gucci the North Face for an example. North Face, iconic outdoor brand, very authentic outdoor brand, gets to suddenly speak to a luxury consumer, and Gucci, authentic luxury brand, gets to speak to an outdoor and also probably a slightly younger consumer than they usually speak to, so kind of a good deal for both sides, and one way of driving energy around the brand that makes sense, and I think in the space of collaboration we always like to say collaboration needs to be exciting and surprising, so if you've seen it come around the corner, then it's maybe not the right one, but above all it actually also does need to make sense. All right, so there needs to be a certain common ground in the end of the day, But really understanding what it means to make a great collaboration and then bringing it to market the right way, because of course the marketplace today is very, very busy, with multiple collaborations launching every single day. It's not so easy to break through, right? But I think that's one of them. In general, content and storytelling, right? So I think the outdoor world, that's somewhat the beauty within it. There are a lot of great stories to tell. Stories about innovation, fabric innovation, silhouette innovation, and so on and so forth. And of course also, very personal stories around people, right? Athletes, exactly, adventurous, and also the activities, that fall within the outdoor space. So really finding, the right language, the right platforms, the right formats, to tell these stories. I think that's probably another space where they can learn a bit. It's a treasure trove of stories, but I think maybe they do not always manage to land the story and get it out in the right way. Years ago it was the snowboard film, the ski film, and so on. So, the climbing movie. What is the right way of transmitting these stories today to a younger audience? And I think the beauty is, probably somewhat fueled also by COVID. I think a young audience increasingly wants to spend time in the outdoors and understands that, urban city life is stressful, is tough on your body, and like fresh air, healthy food, activity, movement are crucial things, in order for your body and your mind to be in the right place. So I think there's a huge interest in it, but again, how are they interested in it? And how is it different from how it was before? Again, for Gucci the North Face, for example, we did content chapters on bird watching, with a super cool bird watching crew from London, super diverse, young, fashionable crowd that goes on the weekends out of London to watch birds. It's like, what the fuck? Like, it's kind of cool. We did vegetable growing, one chapter. Then we did one chapter on train spotting, like kind of weird, cool stuff. Really being, having a close ear to culture, to youth, to even recognize, okay, these guys aren't climbing Mount Everest, but they're discovering the outdoors in a new way for themselves, But it means that you need to be open-minded about it as well, And so I think that's what makes it really exciting. Because sort of as I mentioned before, people tend to be very protective, of course, of their spaces. And I get it, like when I started Highsnobiety, the streetwear world was extremely protective of itself. So protective they didn't want me to write about some of their stuff because they were like, we don't want anybody to know. So like kind of getting out of your own cocoon, being open-minded and showing excitement around, welcoming in new people into your world and realizing, come, and realizing that that it's a good thing that new people enter the space, and being genuinely excited about it, and also maybe not being so judgmental in how people enter that space, like, maybe they walk 4 kilometers a week and not 100.
Yeah, because you can see, I mean, as you know, with my background as well, I do a lot of research and insights around sustainability. You can see that both sports and outdoor brands and in the sustainability area, it's kind of like a bit stuck in like talking about innovations and fabrics and like all the things that they used to talk about, kind of like, what do we say, like to be like business to business kind of information.
Yeah, of course. I mean, sustainability is a tough one also, right? Like, how do you communicate it in a way that connects with people, doesn't feel overbearing, doesn't feel burdensome? It feels like, I want to do that. We need to do that. It's the right thing to do. I mean, obviously, in the outdoor world, Patagonia has for a long time, pioneered that space in very impressive and exciting ways. But I even feel like they're sort of coming to an end of even them, you know, I feel like when I'm looking at these days, I'm like, the product isn't that exciting.
Yeah.
The message feels kind of stale at this point, you know, as true as it's probably truer than ever, but it does feel kind of stale.
It's not as exciting
Yeah.
anymore. No.
Yeah.
It's been some kind of like
Yeah.
Sustainability fatigue with everyone.
In a sense,
out and
yeah,
saying
which is insane,
the same
right?
thing,
Where
yeah.
it's such an important thing, and still there's a fatigue. The same, you know, these days they're throwing around the Ukraine war fatigue, you know, which is also kind of like, it's a kind of sad that you have to find ways of exciting people about such important topics, right? But I mean, that's how the world is, right? I mean, it's all about peaks.
But
And
that's also where like cultural role models, etc., comes in. To make
100%.
that kind of like hard information, tough knowledge, etc., but make it in
Yeah.
that kind of
Absolutely.
fun, inspiring way.
Absolutely. Yeah, talent plays a huge role there. I totally agree. I mean, also, you know, when you have somebody inspiring in front of you that lives a life that is right for the planet, right for themselves, but it's still somebody that you know, that inspires you and that you find, you know, looks cool and dresses cool. You know, like suddenly you're like, is this not only the right thing to do, but it's also possible. And
And you start adapting to the kind of like
100%, yeah, and it's less dogmatic, right? I mean, that's, I think, always the tough part. And I think the other realization that you come to these days, of course, was no matter how much innovation and recycling and this and that, you know, like in the end, it probably the only way that it'll really work is if people buy less.
Exactly, and also no one will change. My belief is that the people won't change if you tell them to change.
Correct.
It needs to be fun,
Yeah.
and just something that happens.
Yeah, totally.
So, actually, this is kind of like the questions I had. The only question I have left is that, like, just to elaborate a little bit around, like, how culture could be used as, you know, as a driving force for change in good. But I think we talked about it a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I mean, to our earlier point, I think it needs to be the driver, right? You know, like it needs to, you know, just feel, it needs to feel like part of your daily life, you know, like, and you know, and that comes through, of course, community and the communities that you interact with, and it becoming the norm within those communities in many ways. And of course, I mean, the truth is there is, of course, change, but it always feels very slow, right? And it's, you know, but then in retrospect, when you look, you of course do realize that a lot has happened and that some of your habits have changed. You know, like if you see it with myself and how I buy food, what type of food, bio, this and that, like my perception of, you know, being vegetarian or vegan, you know, like, I mean, it's everywhere around me, and it, you know, it's something that is not even worth talking about anymore, you know, gender, you know, same thing, you know, like, you know, gay or hetero or like these, like, I mean, like, who even talks about this stuff, right?
A good example from Sweden, growing up in the, as I did, in the skateboard snowboard industry. In the 90s, the vegans, they were labeled in the same box as terrorists.
Yeah, it was weird. Yeah. Yeah, it's like you're nuts.
So, like,
Yeah, correct.
Out of the grid of the society.
Totally. And now, I mean, and the truth is now I sometimes find myself at tables where I'm the weird one, you know, for eating meat. And for you know, basically every coffee shop in Berlin that I go to, I have to specifically say that, I know I'll take, you know, cow milk. You know, it's not also, you know, not regular milk or normal milk. I'll take cow milk because the norm is something else now. And you know, in the same way I see, I'll maybe drink one a day with cow milk, but then all the others, you know, with another type of, you know, like, so there is change for sure. But to your earlier point, in the end of the day, it doesn't come from somebody telling me to change. It comes, it's more social pressure, and not in a negative sense, but like, okay, maybe you need to reconsider this, or maybe there's something you need to change here.
right, that was David Fischer, the founder of Highsnobiety, interviewed by our editor-at-large Fredrik Ekström at ISPO. Next up is Harry Bainbridge. He has the role of strategy director. Talk about how they kind of complement each other, and what was Harry's role in developing this report?
I think that, from my outside perspective, I think that David might be the helicopter perspective and visionary, and Harry is has created the report, done all of it, written it, and produced the report. And he is the strategy director, and as you will hear when he explains how they done it and some insights from it, he's more into the numbers and into the people and understanding the value changes that goes on in the groups.
So just out of curiosity, what was your impression, like what role does this report play for Highsnobiety? Obviously people know them as this kind of lifestyle website. They have an e-commerce, selling sneakers is what I associate them with, and they're kind of finger on the pulse, as you say, in many regards. Why are they doing kind of a report on the outdoors together with ISPO from your perspective? Can you analyze the dynamics here a little bit?
So I think it's important because, Highsnobiety has a really strong credibility in the hype world, talking about what's going on, what's happened next, who's doing what, and all that kind of style and flavor that comes with traditional streetwear and lifestyle brands and culture. However, they started a couple of years ago producing the white papers, the new luxury, and that evolved into more type of insight-driven reports. And I know that that's one of the parts that they want to develop more. I think what's important now with ISPO doing this is to show that what they bring to ISPO is more than just a flavor. It's a true collaboration where they merge the two worlds of outdoor and lifestyle. And by doing the report, they can take it down into texts and insights and perspectives in the report and actually show what do they mean with the emergence of outdoor and lifestyle, and what do they mean with talking about the evolving GORP core trends, and how do that be projected within the archetypes, etc. So it's a way to wrapping it up, putting it all in print.
Good stuff. Let's hear now Harry Bainbridge, strategy director of Highsnobiety.
Thank you. We launched the new Outdoors White Paper today in partnership with ISPO. ISPO bringing the outdoors expertise, Highsnobiety bringing the fashion and style expertise. I think over the last few years we've seen that kind of those two spaces really starting to collide, and from my perspective, whilst we observed the GORP core trend for the past few years, I think we're seeing a much more nuanced perspective than that, and we wanted to set out and formally define it. So we surveyed 400 kind of highly influential Gen Z and millennial consumers. We interviewed a range of experts from brands like Mammut and the North Face and Xenia, all on different perspectives on the changing environment. I think we've generally seen that there's a fashion consumer who's engaging with the outdoors, who wants to not just be high performance, but also be engaged in the outdoors for self-expression, for creativity, for their own mental health. And the white paper really covers this changing attitude. So we're seeing consumers engaging in different forms of outdoor activity, whether that's bird watching or train spotting. We're seeing consumers actively using the outdoors to better their mental health, which is nothing new. But I think it's particularly interesting how kind of formally uncool authorities like Wim Hof have become real icons for the cultural pioneer. I think anything else on that? Not off the top of my head. And then lastly, I think the idea of a GORP core consumer felt particularly outdated to us. So within the white paper, we've defined 5 archetypes, which go into much more kind of nuanced detail of different moods and perspectives on the outdoors, from consumers who are wearing outdoor gear for protection from the elements and they want the best of the best technical gear and are enthralled by that side of it, all the way to kind of projection of their values, those engaging much more from a fashion and aesthetics point of view. So it was really interesting to kind of formally define those 5 consumers, and feels much more sophisticated than just kind of slapping the GORP core label on.
So this is the new GORP core then. We're moving from GORP core into these 5.
Yeah, I think it's the evolution of GORP core. I don't want to say that GORP core is dead, because I think there is still a space for that trend, and especially the kids on the street. That's an amazing way for them to get engaged in the outdoors, and that's another thing we found in the white paper. A lot of consumers have gone on to become very active in the outdoors because they were interested in the fashion first. I think that's new as well. So, yeah, evolution into something more sophisticated. Yeah.
So just a quick note on those. So the 5 archetypes, that's the functionalist, the tastemaker, the classicist, the storm hunter, and the luxury lover. And that ranges then where you label them that they move from protection to projection. Yeah. And how have you defined them? Is that like a work that you have come up with, or is that something that you like cluster from the research? Or
it's a bit of both. I think there's a mix of. I think everything we do from Highsnobiety has a balance of like insights driven, but there is also this kind of intangible cultural truth that we tap into and we kind of know and understand. So it's a mix of surveying and also understanding the products in the market, right? Naturally, Gucci's outdoor line speaks to a very different consumer to Supreme's Gore-Tex collab to traditional North Face garments. So there's an element of kind of these archetypes kind of showing up in our audience of the products in the marketplace, and the kind of findings from our research.
Cool. I want to get back to the section New Consciousness, where you talk about new ways of exploring the outdoors, and you talked about bird watching. For me, that's kind of like also taps into some of the like social media trends of like slow social, where you're like watching that. Is that something that you would say go hand in hand in some way, that the younger consumer group they're slowing down?
Yeah, I think so. I think we always cite the pandemic in this topic, but at a time where we couldn't escape and we were overloaded with screens, and that was our kind of only way out. Naturally, getting outside and disconnecting kind of came hand in hand, and this idea of not being online all the time, I think absolutely kind of ladders up to this idea of a new consciousness and using the outdoors to connect better with yourself and take time for yourself. And I think we have some stats, I can't remember them off my top of my head, but significant number of these consumers are using the outdoors primarily for their mental health, but also to connect with others. And you've seen a kind of amazing wave of these social communities like Flock Together, like Eat Leisure, who are actively trying to forge new communities based around this idea of being outside. Being outside in a community is nothing new, but I think it is new when it's these communities that are driven by culture rather than the pursuit of the activity itself. So I think, ironically, this disconnecting outdoors is forging a new kind of connection. Yeah.
All right, that was Harry Bainbridge, Strategy Director of Highsnobiety, interviewed by our own Fredrik Ekström at the ISPO trade show in Germany. All right, Fredrik, I know you are doing your own report. We have had it on our platform, I think, since the beginning. You've been part of the Transformation Conference talking about your insights. I'm just curious, set this up, what's happening in your world in 2024? And I know there's another edition of the report coming out.
Yeah, reports are part of my repertoire, so to speak. So I've done the report now for this is the 4th year. The next sustainable consumer report is like a quantified consumer research that will come out now in April, and it's what's new for this year is that we're going to include all 4 Nordic countries. Sweden, Denmark, Finland, and Norway. And we will continue look at the Sustainable Readiness Index and the different type of consumer groups, but we will also have an additional report coming up with which is the next outdoor consumer, to talk more a little bit or deep dive a little bit more on how does the outdoor consumer evolve from a broader commercial perspective within the Nordic region? And that will be based on both the quantified 2,500 respondents and also quite a lot of interviews from industry experts.
Good stuff. Looking forward to that. And we are also in the midst of planning the upcoming transformation conferences this summer, so we'll see. Maybe Fredrik Ekström will make an appearance there as well. Thank you so much, Fredrik, for doing this for us and for reporting from the ISPO trade show. You'll be back with other episodes in this feed in the upcoming weeks, so stay tuned for that. Don't miss any of upcoming content and events through by subscribing to our newsletter. Visit scandinavianmind.com/newsletter. This has been the Scandinavian Mind podcast with me, Konrad Olsson, and Fredrik. Thank you so much, Fredrik.
Thank you, Konrad.